Test, test. Okay.
Great. All right. Now for scaling for support without losing personality.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leona. So the story behind this talk is I was here at Write the Docs last year, and I was going to give a lightning talk. But they scheduled me right at the end of the conference, and so I had to leave to catch my flight. So I didn't get to give the talk, but that actually turned out to be a really good thing because I was able to expand on this lightning talk and make it into a full-fledged talk. All right. No, of course, my thing's not working. All right. So when I was here last year and I was trying to explain to people what I do for a living, I kind of dreamed up this graphic. And basically, they're all connected, right? So we have the sphere of support, the sphere of in-product design, and the sphere of documentation, and to that I add tutorials. This model is not limited to software. It actually applies to any kind of product in any realm. But for the purpose of this talk, I'm probably mostly going to be talking about software-related relationships. So, yeah, different kinds of people process information differently, right? As writers, we tend to be mostly visual learners, but there are also auditory learners, and there are also kinesthetic learners who learn by doing. So one of the things that we can keep in mind as writers is how do we not shut out those other people who learn differently, right? It's 2014. We're kind of on the exponential upgrowth of, the way software is becoming more integrated in our daily lives. So more and more people from different industries are learning software, they're learning programming. People who are not programmers by trade or technical by trade, they're basically kind of forced into learning software as part of their job. So as writers, we can help them by keeping in mind that not everyone is like us. Okay, so this is my little fun graphic. One hat is not better than another. And if we want to trivialize what engineers do, we could say, technically, what engineers do is make buttons. And everything else involves personality, right? Engineers don't tend to interface with users directly. They interface with each other, they interface with the code. So the people that deal with support, that is the opportunity that companies have or organizations have to showcase branding and personality, right? So one important thing is to keep the tone consistent throughout. So if you have a help desk people, I think one of the lightning talks earlier, the guy was talking about help desk support in India or overseas or something. So how do you reconcile that part of your brand with your local brand? And the answer is, by the time you're that big, it's basically too hard. So a lot of smaller companies, if you are aware of how these all fit together earlier in the stage of your company, then you can actually scale and keep your personality better. All right. So I'm going to talk about each little sphere really quickly and have some room at the end for questions, hopefully. So I'm self-taught developer, designer person, and these are some of the things that I've learned in my experience. So one of the main things to think about when you're considering design is that users do not always read your documentation on their laptop computers. Going back to what I said earlier, yes, as software is becoming more integrated, people are reading on their phones more often on the go. So it's really important when you're designing a document to consider how is that going to render on a phone, on a tablet, on whatever next device comes out. Another thing designers are really good at doing is visual order, right? So when I was in high school, I was the yearbook editor, and I learned all about, print design and how to make good layouts, good newspaper and magazine layouts. And one of the most important things is flow. So you have a document, and your eye is naturally drawn to the largest thing on the page, right? And in text, it's similar. Your eyes are naturally drawn to the larger text on the page. So there is a visual order to documents, or good documents should have a coherent visual order. Another thing designers think about is the in and out of the page, or the flow. So how did they land on this page? How do I go back? Without hitting the back button, is there, an easy way out of this page? And where do I go next? And the last thing, this also goes back to print design, but it is also relevant for digital, is white space. It's very underutilized in the world of documentation, but it really does make documents less overwhelming. You can look at the documentation and you think, oh, that's just a couple little paragraphs, I can read that, as opposed to if it's a giant volume of text. So these principles of design, they can be applied to the other two spheres that we're going to talk about. All right. So this is my little shout out and plug to all of the wonderful support people. Britta and I were actually talking in the lunch line before this, and we were talking about how support people were like the unsung heroes. And, in my humble opinion, support people are the only people who deserve the hat or the title of ninja, which is why we have the Ninja Turtle there. Support people are the strongest link to help triage issues that come up from your users or your customers or whoever. When they pay money, they want to talk to a human being. They want to know that there's a life form on the other side of that computer screen who cares about them and who wants to help them. So I've worked for a couple of different startups in Silicon Valley and answered tens of thousands of customer support tickets. And the main thing that I can tell you guys today, what I got out of that experience, is that any interaction that you have with a user or a customer is an opportunity for learning, for inserting that question somewhere into the documentation, somewhere into the product design, or making it easier so people do not have to write an email into support and say, oh my gosh, I don't understand this, or this is broken, or whatnot. And I think another speaker earlier said something about this. He said he wanted to put all of his support people out of business, which, you can do that, but, you do need support people. However, over time, they should become more scarce in their work, meaning that every one-on-one interaction they get with a user, they integrate it into the documentation or into the design of the product itself and improve the product over time. So you're not seeing the frequency of questions come up over and over. All right. Lastly, we have Doc Koopa here, and he says that docs are good, but tutorials are better. Show, not tell. I don't know about you guys, but I had show and tell in my elementary school, and they're way more effective than telling. Okay, so Microsoft's original plan was to make money selling programming languages of all things. And there's a couple of sources for that I put on here. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier about how the future of software, Bill Gates theorized that companies would sell languages themselves to hardware, and that would be how they'd make money. But now, as software is becoming more integrated, this is just my opinion, but I think tutorials are going to be where companies have more opportunities to make money, right? And as writers, we are a resource for them. We are one of the greatest resources. And especially when we can show how all three of these spheres, documentation, support, and in-product design, can all work together. So the goal is to overlap those spheres as much as possible, as early as possible, and to grow that. So I think that is all I have, but I did want to save some time for questions. So please feel free